Welcome to the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. Denise, would you like to call everybody to order?
We call the meeting to
Roll call.
order. This meeting will be broadcast live on CTN Cable 16, AT&T Channel 99, and online at a2gov.org. Watch CTN. Public commentary can be made in person or by calling 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099. Enter meeting ID 996-9403-7874. Commissioner Winkler.
Here.
Commissioner Cowan. Here. Chair Stanbaugh.
Here.
Commissioner Meadows.
Here.
Commissioner Cass. Absent. Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
Here.
Commissioner Silva. Absent. Councilmember Song.
Here.
Vice Chair Garber.
Here.
Commissioner Bond.
Here.
Commissioner Spitzmeiser.
Peitzmeyer.
Spitzmeyer.
Peitzmeyer.
Say that again.
Peitzmeyer.
Spitzmeyer. Thank you.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Is there any public comment?
I don't see anyone presently.
Let's move to the agenda then. Are there any, can we have a motion to accept the agenda?
Sure, I'll move to accept the agenda.
Discussion? Any additions, changes? I have two small ones. Under internal business, under follow-up on an ongoing HRC work, I want to add the HRC calendar and the elections for officers. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We are very fortunate to have 4 new people on for the Human Rights Commission. 2 people are new members and 2 are council liaison. Our commission liaisons from council. Sarah Spitzmeyer.
Peitzmeyer. Starts with a P. Peitzmeyer.
Oh, Peitzmeyer. Oh, of course, I'm sorry.
No worries.
How about taking a few minutes to introduce yourself and let us know who you are?
Sure. I'm Sarah Peitzmeyer. I'm really thrilled to be here today for my first meeting as a commissioner. I'm really an honor to serve with all of you. I'm an assistant professor in the University of Michigan School of Nursing and School of Public Health. My training is in public health, and my research areas are around gender-based violence and LGBTQ health. I've also served as a volunteer victim advocate for the National Sexual Assault Online Hotline for many years, and bring some of that practice experience to the work that I do as well. So really thrilled to be here and to work on all of our important agenda together.
Thank you. And Brandon Bond.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me into this space. I really appreciate it, and super excited to get started with all the work that we can do. A little bit about myself. As of this upcoming weekend, I'll officially have my MSW and MPH from the University of Michigan. A lot of my work has surrounded looking into intersectional identities in terms of like DEI, also integrative health and wellness. So yeah, I'm just like really excited to put a lot of the work I've done in the past, research, education, work experience into this position and supporting the residents of Ann Arbor. So thank you all for this space.
Lynn Song.
Hi, I am Lynn Song. I represent Ward 2 for City Council, elected in 2020. Prior to that, I served on the library board from 2016 to 2020. My training is as a social worker, so I have an MSW from U of M. I taught a little bit in international social work. Prior to public life, I had led an anti-trafficking organization specifically on international adoption and seeing to the passage of the Hague Convention on Intercountry Adoption Rights, so making sure women in the developing world have a say as to what happens with their futures and children. I campaigned on the idea that Ann Arbor can be a more equitable city, and look forward to seeing what work we can do to make sure that all residents are cared for. I also helped make sure that we hired a DEI executive for the first time. My apologies to the folks who still wish that money was for the deer call, but we are working for equity for people and trying to make sure that we can address some remedies. Yeah, I'm excited for the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Aisha Gazi, who is not exactly new, but
Yeah.
a new role.
But I'm pumped to be back with like a newfound excitement because there's such amazing people with such like diverse, specialties that are joining us. I'm excited to just keep us going in the work that we've been doing. We've been doing so much around equity and human rights. I've been on this commission since about 2019, I believe, so it's been a while.
Wow.
And you all saw me become a city council member for Ward 3. I thank you for all your support. So right now, I'm working on some things with Laura Porter, which Councilmember Song helped to establish her position around disability. ADA liaison an idea that I came to the commission, CODI, last year. It's actually happening, and I hope to bring that work and other work I'm doing to enrich the work that we're doing here. So, thanks for having me back.
Boy, this is an exciting addition.
Yeah.
And we're very happy to have you. Welcome, all of you. We've got a pretty packed agenda today, and that's why I didn't take time for us to introduce ourselves to you, but we will keep doing that, and you'll get to know us pretty well in no time. Minutes for November 9th meeting. Can we have a motion to consider the minutes?
Motion?
I think we need a motion from a member.
Oh, I forgot.
Catherine.
It's gonna take me a minute. I'm proud.
You can second the motion. I moved.
Okay. Yeah.
We need a second.
Sure, I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion? Any changes, additions, subtractions, corrections? I had only one, and it was the spelling of my name, I'm afraid. Outreach updates. First line. No other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Good. That's done. Maybe we will have time. Okay. Follow up on outside group work, city council. We like to get information from our council liaisons about what's happening that is relevant to us. Lynn, Aisha?
Our meetings have been pretty efficient and shorter as of late. And I'm just trying to remember what we worked on just last week. TC1, so transportation corridor rezonings to improve, encourage more density along Stadium was discussed and is going back to Planning Commission. I bring it up here because if we talk about housing as a human right, this is an issue that has been 13 years in discussion in our city. So it's not a new issue in talking about how we can develop housing along these corridors. And the corridors are essentially Eisenhower has already passed, Stadium has been approved, but going back to Planning Commission for some refinements. And next up will be Plymouth Road and Washtenaw. So that affects both of our wards, Wards 2 and 3. And you might remember a couple years back, we had a plan called Reimagine Washtenaw. So as we look to what AAATA can do now that we've passed the latest millage, it's hopefully good timing and a good opportunity for collaboration so that we can get transit going more often, more reliably along these areas as more housing pops up. And what we're really looking for are multi-use development. So if you want to live above, say, a ramen shop, developers, that's an idea for y'all. This would be a good place to do it. So not just banks and not just storage centers, not just banks with drive-throughs, but we're really looking for infill development, so where there's really relatively low use parcels along these areas. We're hoping folks can come forward and help us build housing, because the university still keeps hiring and is still inviting more students. So that was a big discussion at our last meeting. I'm trying to think of what else we hit on last week.
You know, I'm thinking about us doing a study for the trunk lines.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, so basically, you know, we have these MDOT-controlled major roads called trunk lines. And the problem with that has been that, like, the state is not going to be too, I mean, you know, they haven't been, it's super motivated to make it accessible and bike-friendly in the ways that we want to, right? And the values we have as a city. So we have voted to do a study to see how much would it cost for us to take that over. And, you know, if we potentially do, we'll be able to make a more accessible, equitable environment in those areas.
So it's a needs assessment? A
I think it's like
needs
a
study?
cost.
Yeah, I think it's more cost
Cost.
and
Cost, yeah.
political willingness for the state to not only relinquish control of those roads, but also give us money to maintain them.
Yeah.
As they've done with, I think, in a
In
couple other cities.
Kalamazoo, they gave like 1.10 something million. So it wasn't an insignificant amount, as Councilmember Watson said at the meeting. So, yeah, there would be like hopefully resources around that, but we're looking into it. Yep.
Good. Thank you. Keep us in mind when things happen. We're interested. Complaints. I'm happy to tell you that we only have one complaint in the House. Maybe we'll finish, having finished it all, that would be nice. We had an interesting thing happen. We heard from Aisha that there had been possibly some people who are out of the city, who are landlords, who are assuming that they do not have to follow the Fair Chance Access to Housing ordinance. It's not true. The ordinance is very clear about this.
I mean, sorry to interrupt. The complaint or that happening is true, but the ordinance, there was no loophole in the ordinance.
Excuse me?
Or you're trying to say that there was no loophole in the ordinance, right?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
The ordinance is very clear.
Uh-huh.
The ordinance says, it says that a housing provider shall not at any time or by any means base an adverse action in whole or in part on an applicant's criminal history. And they define housing provider as a landlord, owner, lessor, sublessor, assignee, or their agent, or any other person receiving receiving or entitled to receive rents or benefits for the use of occupancy of any rental unit within a housing facility in the city. So it's the property, not the location of the landlord. I told Aisha that, and I also told her I'd send her the poster that explains it, and when I did that, I read the poster and noticed that that one possible reason that there's question about this, we don't know that this is the reason, is that there's some language that a person who didn't want to follow the ordinance could misinterpret. So it's not incorrect, but it's possibly subject to misinterpretation. And we're going to have that corrected. We've talked to our city attorney liaison, Margaret Radabaugh, and she's going to fix it. We also are going to add a link to the law, to the ordinance on the poster, so that people will have no excuse but to understand the meaning. Should anybody in the audience think that they are being discriminated against this, or they have questions, they should please call the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. It's a new ordinance. It's about a year old, but.
Into your microphone.
Thank you. This Human Rights Commission handles complaints of people who have complaints about violations of this ordinance. So please feel free to contact us. The ordinance itself, by the way, is also published on our website, as is the poster. Anything else we need to say about that, Aisha?
I think one more thing that we should be explicit about is if you're being discriminated against based upon, having a voucher, that is something that we protect under source of income. It's part of our non-discrimination act. Yep. And then if it's based upon having a criminal history, that is something that is addressed and protected in the Fair Chance Housing Ordinance. So regardless, you're protected, and if you have if you face that discrimination, to please come report it to the Human Rights Commission.
Thank you. That's clearer than I.
Leslie, could I add something?
Sure.
Can people hear me? I can't hear myself. Also, people can't really tell why they may not be received well when they're looking for housing. So I would encourage folks who feel uncomfortable or who have a sense, that internal feeling that you may not be treated fairly, to call and ask. Don't just walk away discouraged with this thought that it may have happened, but really call and let's look into it, because we want people to feel that this is a fair community. We want it to be a fair community. So.
Thank you, Keita. That's right. Thank you. If you type in Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission, you will quickly go to our website and find out any kind of contact information you need. Trespass.
That's
Update
me.
on
Hi.
Trespass.
So, good news. Today, we finally have received the long sought after and fought hard to get draft of the new trespass notice. It's 100% better than the one that's currently been in use for years by the Ann Arbor Police Department. It's the one we drafted. They made a few little small errors when they turned it into a form. The group of us that's been working on it just needs to review it one more time, make those little changes, send it back to the police department that will then run it by it's no longer Ariane Slay, it'll be John Reiser looking at it. And then it should go to print and start being used. And then they will have to adjust the policies and procedures to reflect the new trespass notice.
I think it's more user-friendly now and more fair. And
So much more. The old one was Byzantine, really. Yeah, and now there's no longer the 1-year default trespass period in all cases. There's way more flexibility.
that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, that's great. HRC calendar. We have to vote on the calendar. Denise sent us all a copy of the dates for the full year of 2023. It's hard to believe that's coming up, but it is. I looked through my calendar, and I did not find any conflicts with anything that was listed in my calendar. Does anybody have any reason that we should consider for not accepting this?
I was wondering if it's possible to start at 7:30 or if the 7 o'clock time is fixed.
I don't know, I think it's fixed. Is it?
Oh, I am not going to be on the continent of the United States on January 11th or February 8th.
Okay,
So if we could even shift, yeah.
yeah, but that won't help. If you're not going to be here, you're not going to be here for anything. And we don't always make every meeting, but we don't want to have it conflict with a religious holiday or something. I don't know, is there any interest? I think it's going to be hard to change, because that means we wouldn't end until 9:30. If there's interest in it,
I think it's coordinating with CTN, right? Is that right?
that's true
Yeah.
too. Oh, yes, I forgot about that.
Yes, and I would have to approach the city clerks about it and CTN.
Okay.
Okay. It just may mean that once or twice I may need to attend via Zoom, but we can keep it at 7.
Okay.
That would be easier.
That would be fine. It's, now not everybody can meet at every meeting.
Sure, yeah.
So do we have a motion to vote on this, on the calendar, to accept the calendar?
Sure, I'll move to accept the calendar.
We have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Calendar is accepted. I want to announce that our bylaws say that we are voting for officers in January, and that Pam has agreed to be the point person on that, which means that if you want to run or if you want to nominate somebody and want Pam to contact them, you should contact Pam. And you all have a calendar now, so call Pam. Anything you want to tell them, Pam?
Not really, but just as Leslie has reiterated, for those of us who are continuing and for the benefit of those who are new, I believe our bylaws indicate that we need to ensure that we have both a chair and a vice chair for each of our meetings. And as Linda has stated, anyone can express interest in being considered for that. You just need to indicate that, and then we will vote on it officially, and then those persons serve for the full year. This would be 2023. And again, it's something that we do annually. And so however you would like to express either interest or nominate a person for that, so indicate.
Okay, thank you. Old business. Outreach. I have been talking to McLaren Lindsay, who is going to, we're talking about doing a Know Your Rights program for LSNA students. I don't know how many LSNA students. It started out as something that Spectrum was going to co-sponsor, and it keeps changing. But we're going to meet with the University Office of Civil Rights and Title IX to see if they want to participate so that we can have a segment on your rights on university property and your rights off of university property. And if anybody's interested in joining that conversation, give me a call. I think that Brandon and Aiden and Diana are the people who are probably going to be most involved. They both all expressed interest. And you guys can, Brandon, you can let me know if you're interested in that meeting. Annual report. You've all seen this annual report many times, and it's time to give it to council. I guess we need a motion to discuss.
Yeah, because I've been ill, but I do have a thing I would like added to the report.
Okay.
Shall I just go ahead? I'd like to see the database that we use and the annual report reflect calls that are placed that Denise handles, where folks report problems or issues or concerns that they've experienced, but they choose not to complete a complaint.
Well, this is...
Well, let me just tell you why I think. Because one of the things we want to do is capture what human rights related experiences, negative experiences, people see themselves going through, that they're confronted with. Even if their choice is not to pursue anything formal, that gives us a sense of what's going on in our community, what might we do, how can we be helpful.
Yeah. My main objection is that this is the annual report for 2021. We don't have that data for then, but we certainly, at another point, can talk about gathering it. We're going to have it. We're going to start talking in January about what we want to put in the annual report for January for 2023.
Do we not, Denise?
I have a list of names that are calls that come in. It's more extensive for the year 2022 than it is 2021.
Okay, so we want to start 2022?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but we can certainly
And,
consider that then. That makes a lot of sense.
And we had a little committee that looked at expanding the database. Maybe we could meet again with the IT guy who was fabulous. What was his name again?
Nick Sexton.
Nick was great. And so if we could meet again and just create a spot for that in the database, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. We'll consider that and those kinds of questions in January when we start for the year.
So with that, I want to move to accept the 2021 annual report.
Oh, okay. That's good. I need a second?
I just had a response to Kita's comment, which I think is good to capture the information of calls that aren't formal complaints, but I think maybe we're getting a year ahead of ourselves. When we have that discussion, I would think we'd want to capture that separately, because they aren't complaints, they're not the same status. So we'd have a subcategory in the report
Yes.
that would distinguish between
Yes.
inquiry calls and then actual complaints.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're
I think-
not the same, and then they don't
Yeah,
deserve the
no,
same
not
treatment.
treated.
Okay. That said, I second the motion to
Good.
adopt the
Okay.
report for last year,
Okay.
I mean, for 2021.
So is there discussion about this annual report? I have to be honest and say there are 4 changes that I made after you all saw it. I saw actually, Sarah saw that there was an error, and I had put under chapter prohibition of conversion therapy, I said chapter XXX because I didn't know what it was, and I changed it to 1, 2, 3. I added Edwin to Aisha's name, and I changed traditional and simplified Chinese to, to two versions of Chinese to simple and traditional and simplified Chinese. And I changed one date of completion that I'd had a question mark for, and I found out what the answer was. So you're voting, now you can vote on it. If there are no other discussions. All in favor? Hmm? Sure.
So I guess it's more of a question for you all is, when you submit this to council, are there funding requests that that this commission would consider later on as council enters a new budget cycle?
Now, that's a good question.
I'm on the Police Oversight Commission. We have a budget for training for commissioners to attend national conferences. And I don't know if this commission has ever asked for funding to support your work or support.
We've been told no.
Oh, well, that has not stopped people from asking council for money. I don't know if it would, if it actually needs to come with
Yeah.
what you want to put forward to council in the new year, but it could be a resolution that we'll consider next time, or if there's a project that you want to prioritize and would require funding.
When would we have to have this request by?
Budget, we start work sessions in March. We pass, and then the city administrator gives us ideas in May, and we pass the final budget in June.
So we might decide this in January or February.
It might be a holiday consideration for the group if you want to think about what other commissions around the country have done, or if there are conferences you've thought about, books you want to buy. I'm not really sure what costs you already bear as volunteers. There's always costs to volunteering.
Oh, yes. And we've been shouldering them. So that would be, we will think about that.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely, thank you.
That's exciting.
Huh? So glad to have you on this commission.
I can't promise you money.
I know. Okay. Any other discussion about the annual report before we pass it? Send it to council. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passed. Excellent. Washtenaw ID card. Judah and Keita, who wants to start?
Judah, would you start? And then I'll come on.
Sure. So, last thing we did was, there was some language drafted by Corporation Counsel Margie Radabaugh following our Nikita's template. It was good. I don't know that anyone found anything that would improve it, and so as we left it, we liked that language. I think Leslie sent that out with materials, so everyone's had a chance to look at it. I'm not sure we're ready to vote on it yet, but we welcome any further improvements to what looks to be a good improvement.
And just to be clear, this is would be an ordinance that, or an amendment to the non-discrimination ordinance that would make discrimination against government-issued identification card, local government identification card. Illegal. So
Oh,
that,
Okay, now I'm going to jump in.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, because I think folks need to understand the significance of it.
Yes.
So, people may or may not be aware of the fact that tens and tens of thousands of people are unable to access an ID card issued, a government-issued ID card from either the federal government or the state government for a host of reasons, most of which begin with a kind of exclusion. And yet, since, I think everyone knows, since 2001, and since the Real ID Act, more and more activities and resources are restricted to those that have and can produce a government-issued ID card, and that includes folks that need housing, folks that need to enter a soup kitchen. The list goes on. It's really quite extensive. So, for folks that cannot access a state ID card, the city of Ann Arbor, the city of Detroit, and, the city of Ann Arbor vis-a-vis Washtenaw County, the city of Detroit and Kalamazoo County created 3 local government ID cards, the Washtenaw County ID, the Detroit ID, and the Kalamazoo County ID, accessible to folks utilizing a different system to verify identity. So we ran into a problem. I think at this point, over 20,000 cards, local government-issued ID cards, have been distributed among the 3 different locales. And we ran into the problem of lots of private stores, some landlords refusing to accept the ID as proof of identity. That meant that we were back to square one. People had a government-issued ID, their identity was verifiable, and it really looked very much like what Ann Arbor went through when it began a program of providing housing vouchers to folks so that we could have a diverse population and people could access housing. To say, if it pays the rent, then you have to count it like money, and you have to accept it like money. Similarly, if it is a government-issued ID, whether it's issued by the federal government, the state government, the city or a county entity that's issued by a government entity, an ID, a government-issued ID, equals a government-issued ID. And to challenge or refuse to accept a government-issued ID is unlawful in the city of Ann Arbor, and that's what this ordinance states. And what's fabulous about it is that it restores the level of dignity and equality, access to resources that the ID was created to establish. So it is exciting. It takes the, well, what level of government is your ID from out of the equation.
Thank you. That was a great summary. We've got wording.
I'm sorry.
We've got wording for this.
Oh, the wording is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all we need is everybody to look at it to make sure that you think it's good for January. And Keita will come up with a resolution. She's
Yes.
already started it. And we'll try to pass it in January.
Yeah, here's a shocker. The ordinance that the city attorney drafted is so good. It's broader than the resolution that I drafted, and people know I draft pretty broad resolutions. So.
I look forward to doing it. I think it'll be a benefit for the city. It's very good. Unarmed response. You asked me to find out about what's going on. I sent you all a list of some of the places that the consulting firm, Public Sector Consultants, is going to conduct sometimes private town halls and sometimes open ones. There's a lot more than but we don't know. I talked to John Fournier, and he does agree that we should be very much involved. And the consultants will he says they will contact me next week. And I think it's very important for us. I think it's important for us for a couple reasons. First of all, we said we wanted to be, we're very interested in it. It's human rights. Secondly, we've got, incredible skills and backgrounds in this commission, probably better than, well, very, very good. We cover law, public health, human resources, social work, and something else. But yes, and me, management consulting. So it really brings a lot to their table, and I think if it isn't implemented really well, we're going to get the complaints. So we want to do this right. It's expensive and it's really important. So when I talk to the people at public sector consultants, I'm wondering how you want me to arrange things. I'm thinking maybe we have a meeting with all of us at the table and post it, as we always do, and sort of, but that we have a meeting. I don't think we want to be part of a town hall. I think we want to talk to them as us, find out what they're learning, and find out what else they need, and how we can help, what ideas they're not hearing, and make sure that they're hearing what they need to hear. So how do you want me to negotiate this? I guess is what I'm asking. Are you okay with that? If we have a separate meeting with this group?
Yes, perhaps I'm missing material, but do we know what the unarmed response program is going to look like?
No. This is a group that is gathering information about, and that's the problem. They're gathering lots of information, but they've asked strange questions for on the questionnaire. And they're talking to a lot of people, but the questions they're asking and how well they're
I might be able to speak a little bit to this. So I was one of the co-sponsors for this resolution to bring unarmed crisis response to Ann Arbor. And again, I'm also on the Police Oversight Commission. So the intention is that the program could model what Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, I think El Paso, Texas also has a similar program. There are programs like this around the country where essentially we're trying to be more efficient well, it's actually very similar to what we have with supportive connections and matching needs to services in a more timely manner, a more just manner, and in a way to decrease, incidences with the justice system where possible. And this should speak to folks struggling with mental health struggles, with housing struggles, substance abuse, whatever it may be. We should be able to give residents an option to make sure people get the help that they need without necessarily having armed police on site. So since council voted in support of this resolution, we also voted in support of funding the program. So we've allocated $1.6 million from our federal relief money we received for ARPA, the COVID pandemic relief funding. And then it's gone to, there was an RFP to go out for a public engagement consultant to do the public engagement work. After the consultants do this work and just basically analyzing, what is the community's sentiment around this? What are the needs that might present themselves more than others? What kind of expertise do we need to implement this program? Then we'll be able to go back out for an RFP to find someone to actually do this work. One of the things that we've insisted upon is that it be separate from police, separate and independent from police. And we're also looking at a separate call number than 911, which goes to the county dispatch. It's ambitious. It's the first in the state. We're hoping for, and it's separate from CMH of the county mental health. It's separate from the county sheriff, which is something that we have to navigate politically, honestly. And it's not meant to duplicate existing efforts, but be really specific to Ann Arbor's needs. Ann Arbor always feels like we're special. But I think we can be innovative in how we do this work. So that's where we are in the process. So after the consultants do this public engagement work, which should extend into, I think, March, and going out to Peace Neighborhood, Community Action Network, going to, throughout, I think, Jewish Family Services, all of our service providers should be involved in some capacity. Then we can go have an RFP, because if you remember, there was a grassroots group that worked really, really hard on pushing city council to actually commit to funding this. And that's CROWS. It's, what does CROWS stand for? Community, I think, reimagining our safety. Yes. And that was a bunch of public health professors, one of whom I pulled in before we brought this resolution to council, because I felt it was really essential that we had Dr. Jackson from Police Oversight, our chair, and Paul Fleming, who's a public health professor who actually helps form these programs in other cities around the country, really be able to give us some insight as to how we can make this most successful. So a grassroots group kind of formed on the side, and they've been participating in community feedback with the consultants too. And we'll see who will bid on this RFP, but we're a little bit of ways from actually seeing this come together. And we're trying to be careful. But yeah, if commissioners want to, I think what the consultants have done is actually have phone calls with community leaders. So if you want to do 2 or 3 at a time, or however you want to organize yourselves, I think they're open to whatever's most convenient for you all.
Yeah, great, thank you.
I'll try to talk to them and see what.
Can you speak into?
Sorry. You want me to talk to them and see what they want to do and get back to you with it and negotiate something?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, but we've got interest, is that correct?
Yes.
Good, good. Well, speaking of Arm response,
Leslie, before you go on, there were a couple things I forgot about the ID project. I was so excited about the city council potential vote. The ID now only costs $10. It used to cost $25, so now that economic hurdle is down. And in addition, we found out that Meyer is accepting the Washtenaw County, the Kalamazoo County, and the Detroit ID. So go shop at Meyer. It's been one of the things, I get a lot of email about that. People want to go there. It sells everything in the world. And it was a hardship on folks to really utilize that. So 2 hurdles down in,
excellent.
yeah, wonderful.
Thank you, Keita.
Okay, thank you.
I was talking to Frances Sedora Hargraves, and she mentioned supportive connections. And we were talking about unarmed response anyway, and it occurred to me that supportive connections was a fascinating place. We needed to know about it because it was possible that we would that we could help them for some of the cases that they're going to handle, and that they could be a resource to us as well. It also is true that having a group like this in the city, this is a group in the city, it just started, they will tell you all about it, but having a group like this is a very good beginning. It's a good beginning for an armed response. This is a kind of group that can keep that going, that can provide it with next steps or first steps. I mean, again, as resources and as referrals. So I invited them, Karen Field and Jonathan Lay, to talk to us about supportive connections. And I was hoping that the students would be here. They're waiting for 3 of them. Oh, okay, okay, so they're coming. But they're going to miss this, which is a shame, but you can talk to them later.
I can talk to the students later, though.
But you'll stay in here and listen to their presentation, because that comes next, is the presentation of social work students on unarmed response.
Thank you, everyone, so much for having us here tonight. My name is Karen Field, as Chair Stambaugh said, and I'm with the program director for the city's new deflection program, Supportive Connections. And with me is Jonathan Lay. He is our case manager. So we are the Supportive Connections program. We are a brand-new program with the city of Ann Arbor. I came on the very end of July, and Jonathan came on in September, and we started taking referrals November 2nd. And to date, we've had 18 referrals so far, so from different agencies. So we've kind of worked it around. So we are very excited about this new program and its potential and opportunity. I don't know if my PowerPoint reflects our excitement or not, but it has some information in it. And I promise you, I will try not to read to you from it. But like I said, we are just a brand new program. We're deflection. And what that means is our mission is kind of to work with people that are at risk.
Let me just tell everybody that they can see it on the screen. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. And you said we could provide it later if anybody wants a copy or whatever with the general information. It's very general information. We are a new program, so we're a dynamic entity, and we are trying, as things need refining and improvement, we are open to that. But really our mission is to help people that are at risk of becoming involved, re-involved, further involved with the criminal justice system. So kind of with a focus on mental health issues and substance abuse issues, and housing insecurity. So those are kind of our focuses on the potential causes of people being involved in the criminal justice system. So that's kind of our focus related to that. We're deflection, meaning we're going to try and be involved before people become involved in the situation. There's a lot of programs out that are diversion programs, and those are programs that are great, and they have their purpose. There may be court involved or law enforcement, and they're kind of, for lack of a better analogy, carrot stick programs. Whereas if you do something, we'll do something for you in return. So you do all the stuff and your case will get dismissed, you won't be charged, whatever it may be, reduced charges, etc. Deflection is before that. So it's like hopefully helping people before they become involved. And it's a voluntary program. So will there be people who tell us they're not interested to take a hike? Yeah, that's actually happened. But we're out there and we put it out there that we can be involved, and it is a voluntary program. So who is our program open to? It's an adult program right now. I do have a personal passion for juveniles, but adults is a better way to not a better way to start, a little easier way to start. So anybody who's 18 years or older and they have a connection to the city of Ann Arbor. So we are trying to be very broad in our definitions right now, extremely broad. So connection to the city of Ann Arbor doesn't mean you have to be a resident. You can live here, and we define living here as it could be permanent housing, it could be temporary housing, it could be the shelter, the park, the street, staying on a relative's couch, staying with your mother who may live here, whatever it may be, living in the city of Ann Arbor, working in the city of Ann Arbor. So that's obtaining any income, whether it be taxable, reportable income or anything, but any source of money within the city of Ann Arbor. So if it's people, trying to get money within the city, and it may not be what someone would consider legal, but they're getting some money, we can have that connection here as work in Ann Arbor. And then if you have a child who goes to Ann Arbor Public Schools, or you yourself are in the Ann Arbor Public Schools, such as the adult ed, then we would consider that an Ann Arbor resident. So we do try to broadly include as many people as we possibly can in our definitions. And so what we do is we look at the individual needs. It's client-centered. We try to be non-judgmental. It's non-coercive because we are not law enforcement or court involved, and try to look at the individual's needs. Our case manager, who's Jonathan here, will kind of assist and work with people with their needs within kind of existing community resources. You know, we're not looking to reinvent the wheel or step on anyone's toes if they already have an existing relationship, but maybe to help. You know, you may have someone who's working with an agency and they don't get to see their client very often, and we get a participant referral on that, and they say, well, I'm working with, you know, Mr. or Ms. X from this agency, and we reach out to them, and maybe they didn't know that their client was having some issues that was going on. And if they're comfortable and in a good relationship, we don't want to interfere with that, but we want to be able to help fill in the gaps. So we have some funding in different ways to help fill in those gaps. So, you know, we work with a core team. We're going to have kind of a team approach in the fact that we're going to have people we contract with. Right now, so far we have the shelter and Dawn Farm on board, the public defender. And what we're going to do is just sort of meet and discuss people that we get referrals on as a case to try and network and brainstorm the best possibilities. But we're also going to have a broad network. We're reaching out in the community on a weekly basis to new agencies and things like that, so we can build a network of people, because they'll be resources for us to use, and we will be a resource for them as well. So we are working on our network building. That's been it's been busy and it's been very fruitful, and we've really enjoyed it. So we do have a budget to help people out. We have some funding to help with substance abuse treatment. So if someone can't afford to go to substance abuse treatment and they need it and they want it, then they are able to go. You'll find a lot of insurances cover things like residential treatment. They might cover outpatient treatment, but they don't cover something like transitional housing, which for some people can be critical and keep helping them maintain their sobriety. So we have some funding to help with things such as that. For mental health treatment, for things like GED materials or educational materials or educational programs. If someone needs a fee to apply to an educational program, we can help them with that fee. So it's not an impediment. I was very interested when you were talking about identification. And that's one of our things is identification procurement. Is, you know, people have to pay for their birth certificate, your own birth certificate, you know, and especially if it's not in Washtenaw County, it becomes even more and more difficult. So we have some financial resources to be able to help with that, or the $10 fee, you know, to be able to help people. Because for $10, sometimes it's a lot for a lot of people. I mean, we had a man who has a half-fare bus card, but couldn't afford the 75 cents to get on the bus. So just things like that. And so transportation is also one of our issues. We are linked in with the Fair Deals, so we can help do the Fair Deal cards for people, and then we have bus tokens, things to help. We did have a recent situation that within our transportation allowance, that we had a person who was stuck outside the county, and she was living in her car at the rest area and needed to get back into Ann Arbor so she could get some services. And because of barriers and boundaries and different things, she wasn't being able to help. We were able to get a $25 gas card, which these days is not a lot of gas, but was able to be enough gas to get her back to Ann Arbor and get that person back to Ann Arbor and get them some services. So we can help with little things like that. And that was something that agency could not do, and we were able to help them fill that gap. So that's kind of how we have some financial things to do, things like that. How do they get to us? How do the referrals come in? We put our name out there like we are doing tonight. So we get out there. We have 3 different ways we take referrals. So we have our own webpage. So we're on the a2gov.org/supportive connections. And on there's a little link that you can do a referral. Anybody can do a referral. We actually have one person who called and referred themselves. They saw our card somewhere and were able to do it. So we've been passing out our little resource cards, as you can see tonight. So it's us. It's got all our information on there, and it's just got some local. It's small print, but it's still some good local resources that somebody can have that they may need. So we've been passing those out among the community and getting those out there. So anybody can do a referral online. They can email us at supportiveconnections@a2gov.org, or they can do it by phone, 734-6934. That's our office number, so you can do that. We are not an emergency response person, so we try to get out. Whether we say within 5 days, you know, of getting the referral to be able to follow up and do that. People that refer are anonymous to the referrer, unless they don't want to be. But if you refer someone you don't want to get out there, like, you know, Mr. Smith, your mother called and said you're having some problems. You don't want that to be known to that person. That can stay confidential. So we may follow up and get some information from that person, but it's not going to be disclosed to the person who is referred to our program. And that's basically it. This is us. This is our contact information on here, our emails if you've had any questions, and we're open for questions tonight.
Question?
It's exciting. I have 50 questions.
Okay. I hope we have 50 answers.
Have you begun service?
Yes, we have. Yeah,
How many folks are you serving currently?
we have had 18 referrals. Of them, we are serving 4.
Currently, I've got 5 open
Right.
cases.
What do you consider your capacity? Do you consider it by budgetary constraints or human power constraints?
Human power mostly, to be
Yeah.
honest. Right now, the program is just Karen and I, and I'm doing a lot of the actual field work and outreach. As a social worker, like, try and do as much as I can, and often will. I do suffer from the social worker's plague of yes. But yeah, like it's really a lot of the individuals that are coming across my desk right now don't need as much intensive case handling, and ultimately, like Karen said, we're not trying to replace existing services. So if somebody's already got an existing case manager with an existing service, I'm going to reach out to them and say, hey, how can we work together? Or I'm going to connect them with an agency that already that can do more long-term work that'll then free me up for more people. Does that mean that I'm not going to end up with clients that are going to be on my books for quite some time? No. Because there are those cases that are going to be more complicated, more nuanced, that are going to require a little more hand-holding per se, but a little more juggling of services to make sure that everything's being attended to through a multitude of agencies. We're really looking to be that connection between agencies where people tend to fall through. So.
Now here's a tricky question. And
I just want to add to your question. Our goal to, this year was 100, and that's, again, requiring different levels that we're going to have in case management. Some people may just be a referral on a closed case, so that was our initial target this year. But the trivia question?
Oh, no, I appreciate that, and that would be great. I just think you'll have lots of referrals.
Yeah.
How will you keep your program from targeting folks that have become involved with the criminal justice system, not due to their conduct, but due to the structural racism of the criminal justice system? Like, how do you work with both groups?
So, and Karen and I have had this discussion several times, actually, and a lot of what we're finding is our job's turning into not just that individual, like, work with the individual side, but a lot of outreach into the community to say, let's talk about where these people are coming from, or what is your perception of the individuals you're sending towards us, and how can we adjust that picture in order to help the community realize just because somebody's different or has a different set of privileges than you does not necessarily mean that they're a worse or lesser person for you.
Oh man, do I hear advocacy for the person in there? That's fantastic.
I am a social worker.
Thank you.
I have a question. What if you don't know the person's name? If it's not somebody who you really know very much about, but you know he sleeps on your doorstep your business doorstep every night or something?
We've had one of those. We try to get as much detail and information as we can. If you know, is there a routine that person follows? Is there something they routinely wear? What do they look like? So that when we're reaching out to them, that we can kind of have an idea. If you see them in that area, can you let us know? Like I said, we're not an emergency response,
Right.
but if there's things or information you have that kind of narrows it down as much as you can, you may not know the person, like you said, who's outside, but you know that they're there every night. Or you know that they're there every night, and you know when things are changing with them, that you see things, it's like, they don't seem to be themselves, or something might be going on, and I feel like they might need some help, then they can reach out to us.
Or even like if there's a specific pattern to their behavior of when they show up to places. There have been a couple of referrals that we've already received where I've gone out late night to be like, hey, I know this person's supposed to be here at this time. Let me go check at that time. And then, or if we had one referral where it was an 8-hour window. I went out several times
Wow.
And
at different hours of
yeah.
the day to try and catch up with that
That's
person.
terrific.
So we do everything we can in order to locate that person with as much information as we are given.
And we may not be lucky every time, and we know that, and the thing is, we make, multiple efforts at a certain point, we have to close it out, but maybe we'll get another referral. And it's the same thing with someone who tells us, initially says, no, I'm not interested in your program. Well, they might be interested in it 6 months from now, we never know. So we're gonna be out there to be able to be there for them if
Give
things
them
change.
information.
Right.
Yeah. You use the term bridge in your materials,
Mm-hmm.
and I like that idea of bridging many, maybe all, social services, whatever they're involved in. That's a,
Yeah, I've been in this community for a number of years, and there were things, there's new services and things I'm finding out. I think there's new things starting all the time, and we don't always all know about each other. So I think having an open line of communication is critical. It's important. I think there's a lot of people in this community that are doing really good work, and we just need to be aware of each other and open to each other.
any other questions for this group? Anything we can do to help you?
Oh, I have another question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You said 50, I'm waiting.
I know that these are early days, and there are only 2 of you.
And stuff changes every day with how we do things.
But
We're working on it.
diversity is a concern, and that folks will respond differently. We have a large Asian community, large African-American community that certainly needs your help. And will respond differently if their caregivers or advocates, right, reflect their reality. Would your next hire be more diverse and from a community of color? I tell you, I'm full of hard questions.
Yeah, I hope so. I think we are striving to do that. We are very much working with Laura Orta and the DOE, her office. So we are very much aware of that. That is a concern that I personally have, because outward appearances, I'm not diverse, And so I think that's something that we very much strive for.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and then, first, love the work that you're doing. I think it's really important to fill those gaps and make those connections between organizations and just, the work that needs to be done. I had a question about, in terms of your interactions with clients or members, just how long could that last, I guess? Thinking about sustainability-wise, that could be just like something I'm curious about, because you did say like some cases kind of open, close, but I would imagine some can be a bit more complex and long-standing. So just, again, thinking about like your own well-being too, just how to juggle that. Is there like a cutoff time of just,
We don't, and some of the reason we don't is because one of the things I saw is, with like some of our court programs and things, is they have statutory limits. So it's like, okay, 2 years, you're done. And it's like some people might need more than 2 years, things like that, so that we don't have time. It might be one of those things that they kind of come in and out of our lives maybe a little bit. And so we don't have an imposed time limit on anyone to say this is the time, because there are people that need care for and assistance kind of to help walk them through things for the rest of their lives, and that we can, at a certain point, Jonathan has got that social work background to say, this is someone we have to kind of wean off and move them on to other things, but we don't have to have it say you have to be done this is a one-year program and you're done.
In me working with other agencies to try and get them a more long-term case manager, doesn't always fit with somebody. Like, not everybody's going to have that one agency that they're going to perfectly fit into to have that long-term case management. And frankly, like even on my home visits with individuals, I don't have a time limit on that. Like, I went today and spent 2.5 hours sitting on somebody's couch just catching up, and figuring out like what's the plan that's going to work best for you. You tell me what you want to do, and we're going to sit down and work together. I'll give you some recommendations based on what you're telling me that you may not have thought of. But as far as time goes, no, I'll work with somebody as long as they need me to, and as long as I'm available to. But at some point, to the flip side of that, they do have that agency to still say at some point, I'm sorry, I don't feel like this is working for me anymore. Bye. So that's their call. At that point, I'd have that conversation to say, well, would you like me to just touch base with you in another week to make sure that that's the right decision for you? They have the agency to guide their own experience with us.
Thank you. And then I had a follow-up question too. I know you said that the services are for like people of adult age or 18 and older. So if you do like encounter referrals and stuff, I was just curious about what do you do if they are a minor and everything? Like I know this doesn't like serve them, but in case you can't just like not respond in a way. So I was just curious like what that follow-up is in terms of minors.
There are community resources out there for minors,
Right,
and we would, we always, if anybody calls us and says, even if they are someone who would necessarily qualify for the program, but they have a question about where would I call to get this? Like somebody called today and said, where will I go to get a coat? When we were trying to figure out what agencies to go just to get a coat, so that kind of thing. If there's someone who's who's under 18 and needs some services, there are some services out there that we're familiar with and Jonathan's familiar with that we could refer people to, like this is someone you might want to call.
And to broaden your question even further beyond just the 18 and unders, because I come from the CPS world, so like my passion is for kids. Like I always work youth and family services in one fashion or another across my career. But if we get a referral or a call for somebody who doesn't quite fit our program, largely because they live outside of the city, they work outside of the city, they never come into the city to do anything, like they're very Dixie eccentric or east side of or west side of the county eccentric, I'm going to work to connect them to another service that's going to be better for them. Like they're not going to leave without at least something of a direction.
Yeah.
Because that's just not fair either to be like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Let me give you another resource that you might be able to connect for that'll be a better fit for you.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, this will be the last one. Is that okay?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
You can call me or email me.
but because we talked about unarmed response, does your protocol, is it developed enough so that should someone get out of hand, I mean, there will be folks who won't, who get angry. Is there a policy on expulsion from the program? Do you work with folks? I mean, how does it work if someone, has an anger episode?
I can only speak from my experience on that. Do we have a direct policy towards that at this moment? No. My experience with that is I usually shut the session down. Whatever we're doing in that moment, we're done in that moment. Let's get you calmed down, we'll figure it out. And there's always follow-up. There's always follow-up because there are a lot of things that trigger people, a lot of things that set off that response. And 9 out of 10 times, it's probably not me, it's something that I'm representing in that moment, in that instance, in that conversation. So that needs to be looked at. So that's the approach that I've always taken in any role that I've ever had. And it's the approach that I intend on taking going forward as well. If somebody suddenly becomes a direct health risk to myself and my existence, that's another conversation. But in my entire 20-year career working for nonprofits, I can think of 3 instances. So that's such a rare thing that I feel like most instances can be addressed.
That's fantastic. I would say you do have a protocol, just not written down maybe.
Right.
Seems
We
like-
do discuss. I mean, I'm very, I want to be aware and protective of safety. I think we both come from backgrounds where we have a pretty high tolerance of what other people might consider to be anger, or outburst, or danger, and it's, not. That's true.
I just have a background working with folks with mental illness, who would work with
Right.
the mental, and anger is not an
Yeah.
uncommon thing to run into.
Anger is not uncommon at all.
With my own background from CPS to working with the homeless population within the city of Detroit, to working with CMH providers, or as a CMH provider in the city of Detroit. In other programs that are all outreach-based, you get that experience and you sort of build up that tolerance of like, well, we'll talk about this later, but we're going to calm you down, and then I'm going to go away to separate things. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you. It's wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, you too.
So glad that this is a city program. I think Arian Slay and city administrator were the ones who triggered this.
Yeah, I just wanted to give credit to former city prosecutor Attorney Slade, now Judge Slay, for coming up with this. And this funding's from the marijuana revenue that comes back to the city. So this was funding that city council had allocated after then Attorney Slay had recommended this as a priority for her office. And I think that's I don't think that funding's only for 1 year. Is that right? Or is it 2
think so. I
years?
think there's a little carryover, but yes.
Yes. So the marijuana, the Ann Arbor there's still marijuana being sold in Ann Arbor. So with that ongoing revenue, I'm just really proud of how the city has really allocated this for justice work. And the mayor, when this was passed earlier or actually last year, 2021, had indicated how the intention was to speak to the war on drugs and how, communities of color were targeted and impacted the most, and how we can think about this work as being part of that, a resolution towards that. So thank you for all the work. And let's keep funding this.
Yes.
Aisha,
Well,
you're on council with me, so you get to help me.
You were trying to ask me if I had a question. I don't.
No.
I just think it's great work. It's really great work.
It is.
And I'm glad the city is able to help support it, and we're going to fight to keep it ongoing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be well worth every cent of it. And we will be in touch, I'm sure.
Yes, please do be. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
evening.
Thank you for coming.
And we're seeing, I promised Denise I'd turn this off.
Yeah.
There we go.
Can you, okay, thank you.
Now we come to one of the benefits of partnering with the School of Social Work. It was started by Aisha Gadzi Edwin, and now we have Trina Shanks, thank you, whose class we went to. They chose, I think, 4 topics, and the one we think that would be the most relevant right now for what we're doing is unarmed response. Who knew? Do they need to know how to use the
Your file is loaded, so all you have to do is click on it on the screen.
So this is
Your
something
PowerPoint.
they've been working on all semester.
You see it?
Sorry?
You see your PowerPoint?
Oh, there's the.
They had some information, I went to the class, I gave them some information about Ann Arbor and about where unarmed response
There you go.
was at the time in September. And let's see what they did with it.
I have a quick question. How do I make it in presentation mode through PDF? I am not tech savvy.
We see it on our screens. You see,
You want to put it in presentation mode?
Yeah, or unless this is all right with all of you.
Is there a
Presentation mode
way
looks
that you
nice.
can put in presentation?
I think it,
I think it's.
I think
it's
it will get better. I had trouble looking when I looked at it too, but I think your next slides look more, this slide looks like it's,
Can you go to the next slide?
yeah, why don't you go to the next? Yeah,
There you go.
see?
Okay.
So that's all right with all of you? Okay, perfect.
Cool. Well, first and foremost, thank you for your time and attention this evening to hear our presentation on unarmed response for the city of Ann Arbor. My name is TK Crafton, this is Sierra Gordon, Andrew Maynard, Quan Ting Wu, and behind me is Matthew Clinton. And we all had a hand in this project. So first and foremost, I think it's important to talk about why we believe unarmed response.
Do we need it
is-
louder?
I can't hear.
A little louder?
Yes.
Okay. Of course, I'm a little bit tall, so I might have to do an interesting crouch thing. So first and foremost, why we believe that unarmed response is necessary in the first place. We really believe that there is a really important component to recognize, and that's in times of crisis, people can have a tendency to, on a nervous system level, shift into a state of fight, flight, and freeze response, in which survival, protection of life and limb is the priority. And in this state, rational thinking and logical decision-making is not accessible. That can be further intensified when there is an armed responder in the situation. And this is largely because there are various cultural associations, lived experiences, other unconscious responses that take place in the presence of armed responders, such as police officers. And that is, again, reinforced by the experience of police brutality. And we use the definition here specifically, of which there's also more minor instances that take place, but very severe ones of beatings, racial abuse, unlawful killings, torture, indiscriminate use of riot control against agents at protests as well. And so again, we really want to emphasize the importance of having an unarmed response because it is more appropriate when an individual is in a survival state. And that survival state can then lead to actions and behaviors that can really contribute to possible criminal charges and only making things worse for that individual and whatever led up to the crisis to begin with. And again, that's why we think that it would be really beneficial for an unarmed responder to be part of this. They have the training, they have the education, they know how to step in and use de-escalation tactics that really emphasize the dignity and worth of that individual, as well as being able to have the ability to maintain the relationship with that individual as a member of our community. And they also provide more direct services shortly after the time of crisis, whatever was the response, as opposed to having a delay in which situations can again begin to exacerbate as well. There are a few programs out there that are already doing this, and they're doing it well. One of them in particular is located in Eugene, Oregon, and the Springfield, Oregon metropolitan area, and it is the Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets, super fun acronym for CAHOOTS. And this program was created as a mobile crisis intervention program operating 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it pairs a medically trained individual with a crisis response individual as well. And again, this is a service that provides immediate response to situations involving psychological issues. They also provide information, assessment, and transportation when need be. And this is a service that was developed to be able to work with the dispatchers of the metropolitan area. A little bit more information on this program. It is organized by the Whitebird Clinic, which is a federally qualified health clinic, so there's certainly some legitimacy to this program. And again, in this model, there's a crisis worker who is trained to respond to a variety of social and behavioral situations, of which there's all different types that can take place, different combinations of situations, and they really have the skill and ability to intervene in a variety of circumstances. And again, in this, there's also training for the 911 dispatcher as well, and they are trained to recognize when to reroute calls from the police to the CAHOOTS program. And so the initial response is having the when the CAHOOTS team is called to the situation, it is initially just them, but there is the possibility of having police being called if the situation deems it necessary. And to offer a statistic, in 2019, out of 24,000 calls, only 150 of them were then requested to have additional support from the police. And an additional statistic as well, it was 3 to 8% of calls were diverted from the police, which then saves time and energy of the police officers as well as resources as well. And then the cost of this program in particular is approximately $2.1 million. Another program, is one in North Carolina. It is the HEART program, standing for Holistic and Empathetic Assistance Response Team. This one is a little bit different in that it has 3 different parts. The first one being a crisis call diversion, in which a clinical provider is the one to engage in like immediate behavioral response situations. There's also a community response team, in which it's a 3-person team, including an EMT, a peer support personnel, and a clinician as well. And this is a team that has the ability to mobilize and to respond to crisis situations in the community. And then lastly, again, like I mentioned earlier about being able to connect people to resources sooner rather than later, there is a care navigation provider who follows up within 48 hours or so of the initial contact at the time of crisis for a checkup, and then also to see what resources might be necessary for that individual. And this one, it definitely has a good response from the community that it's serving. And the last one we'd like to offer an example of is located in Denver, Colorado. It is the STAR program, Support Team Assisted Response. Again, very similar to CAHOOTS in that there's a medical responder who is working in addition to the behavioral health clinician, and they respond to situations involving mental health, homelessness, poverty, and substance abuse situations. And again, this is a program that is dispatched through Denver's 911, and they are trained to appropriately divert that call based off of the needs of the situation. And again, it allows for access to transportation, providing more humanistic intervention, de-escalation tactics, and providing information for community resources. And then groups that are here in Washtenaw County that are currently supporting an unarmed response to the needs of our community is the Coalition for Re-envisioning Our Safety, otherwise known as CROWS. And they're working towards adapting an unarmed response team here in Washtenaw County. There's a breadth of knowledge and experience that's going into this group. They're founded by researchers, social workers, faith leaders, and activists. And again, the idea is separating the police from crisis intervention and to have an independent group to be able to come in times of crisis and intervening in a way that more appropriately de-escalates situation and provides resources.
All right, hi everyone. So this next part of our presentation is going to be more focused on our journey throughout this time, because we realize there are so many factors to consider with this unarmed response, and we wanted to kind of highlight what it has looked like for us, for people in the future that are like, what might this look like for me? So our initial intervention idea, we started with having that co-response team with an armed police officer, as well as a crisis intervention specialist or a social worker. So our intention was to provide that support for the crisis intervention specialist so that if they felt like they were in a situation where they would be harmed, they would be able to call upon that police officer and have that handled in more of an armed response fashion as they were afraid of potential violence. And we kind of wanted to pass like the police officer being nervous that they are in danger by having that safety phrase for the social worker or the crisis intervention specialist to use so that they know that they are de-escalating and they know when they feel unsafe rather than have the police officer determine when they are feeling unsafe. And then we would just have additional training for those 911 dispatchers so that they would understand when to send someone with an unarmed response unit or just send someone with an armed response unit. So we had a meeting with Sheriff Clayton, and he does agree that there is a space for co-response teams. They're considering piloting a co-response program. He's a very large advocate for this, and having that co-response unit within the police force. And suggested that we can train them together so that they're a more cohesive unit. And the main barriers that we talked about are jurisdictional barriers, as in, are we going to be doing this the same across counties, separately across counties? Where is the funding coming from across different counties? And then potential issues with funding. Where is this money coming from? Is it coming from the police? Is it coming from outside sources? Are we allocating money from elsewhere? And then political boundaries, because people with different political beliefs have different feelings on unarmed response units, and that's something that we need to address. And so we did send a survey to the police force to get their perspective, because we understand that they are a large part of this, whether we have that linked unit or if we have a completely separate unarmed response unit. And so we wanted to really gather that insight onto current police training and education regarding mental health and behavioral health. And so we requested more anecdotal experiences so we could really understand where they were coming from. And it was meant to include like that police perspective, like I mentioned. They did not have any responses, which we understand they're incredibly busy. So that's just how life is sometimes. But the thing that really made us stop and pause and reconsider our intervention was this situation. I'm going to slightly describe it for all of you if you haven't heard of it. There was a man of color who was schizophrenic, and he was in the middle of a mental health crisis, and he had a knife. He slashed his brother's tires, so the brother called the police to keep him safe. And so they actually had this co-response unit come and talk to him, and they were using that de-escalation, the crisis intervention specialist, but the police intervened and shot him and killed him. And so it was just something that really was harrowing for us and made us stop and think, well, is this what co-response is going to look like for us? So we had a meeting with Reverend Reich along with the coalition, re-envisioning our safety. Some of the members from that were there, and they were lovely. And they described having that completely unarmed response option rather than having it as a unit with the police. And they are more from an abolitionist standpoint, which we are trying to avoid in this presentation. But they did mention that co-response teams just simply would not work. And one of the main reasons is that we can't train the police out of the use of violence. They are trained as armed response units. They are trained using guns. And we can't necessarily stop that, particularly in fight, flight, or freeze situations. And then there's that power dynamic of, if there is an armed responder and an unarmed responder, how does that affect how they react to each other and how they react to the situation? And how comfortable will that unarmed responder feel actually speaking and using their voice if there is someone that is armed beside them? The major barriers that we discussed were lack of imagination, and that really means we haven't had a program like this in Michigan. So how would that look to people? Would it feel believable to them? And I think that we could combat this through doing a survey and kind of getting the feel of what Washtenaw County feels, and because it is successful in other areas, like with Cahoots. And then where will that funding come from is a frequent thing that comes up. So our official intervention is based more on Cahoots, and partially the STAR program, but we have more of an emphasis on Cahoots. We want to implement that unarmed response system that is separate from the police department and just have an unarmed responder to handle these different crises that don't necessarily need an armed response. This includes non-criminal cases such as homelessness, intoxication, disorientation, substance use, and mental illness problems, etc. And so our response team would include both a social worker or crisis intervention specialist, as well as an emergency medical technician in case there is that medical emergency that needs to be addressed immediately. So while those are dispatched through the local PD, like with Cahoots and such, we will not be doing that, although we will have separate trained dispatchers within that dispatch community that are specifically trained for our unarmed response program. And they would be the ones that sent them to us rather than the police. So what will this budget look like? When we talked to the Coalition for Re-envisioning Our Safety, they estimated that that 2-year pilot program would cost about $3 million a year, and Cahoots costs about $2.1 million, so that's around the right ballpark. And in Washtenaw County, the sheriff's annual budget is about about $30 million for 2022, and it is 47% of our tax revenue. And so our budget that we calculated out was around $720,000 for that entire first year of a pilot program. And that's using averages in Ann Arbor, so it could go up, it could go down. And So we were thinking that we could divert some of those funds from the sheriff's office and use that for an unarmed response program, since Sheriff Clayton is an advocate for that unarmed response. And they would still have over 30 million to work with for the police force, because we understand that their budget is incredibly important. And so those are all of our slides. We would be happy to take questions at this time.
Questions?
Great presentation. Thank you for coming today. My first question was the Cahoots and Star and Heart, they were all run through 911 dispatch, it sounded like, and it sounds like the model we're considering here would be completely separated. So would we be the first program to be completely separated like that nationally, or are there other models that we can look to?
So what we were thinking was not completely separating from the police force. We are going to have trained dispatchers within the police force that will understand and be able to implement switching from a crisis or the police response to a crisis intervention. So we'd be using the current police force dispatchers, just like those programs where we would train, the idea is to train them specifically to understand the crisis, when to react, and how to react to it.
So Lynn, does that match with what you were saying earlier?
I think there's a little bit of confusion. The county sheriff's office is independent from the city of Ann Arbor, and so is their budget. This program that we're proposing is actually within the city, so the sheriff's office is separate. I think if you had spoken to our police chief, our previous police chief was in support of this. Our interim police chief is in support of this, and their budget is $30 million. So if you look at what was budgeted from federal relief money compared to our police within our city, it should be a good budget. But as far as the 911 dispatch, the way policing is structured in the city and the county is interesting. We actually get, there's a county mental health millage that was passed, I think, in 2016, 2017, and we get a revenue reimbursement from the county because the county, county sheriff doesn't work within the city. So instead of doubly paying for police services, we get that money back that's supposed to go towards pedestrian safety, climate action, and affordable housing. And now that our climate action millage has passed, we're looking at perhaps putting that money towards more unarmed crisis response work. So I just want to explain a little bit how money works, because then you can also understand how the decision-making and the political support for this would work, and why the 911 dispatch question is up in the air, because we don't have the infrastructure to have that particular call service to go to us directly yet. But it can be if the community asks for it, if we ask for it and we participate in the community feedback that the consultants are working on. So I would hope we would have a separate number from the county, because we're trying to approach mental health, crisis response differently than how the county is approaching it. We have different resources in the county. We have a tighter jurisdiction. We can also pilot it in, say, just in the downtown area, and then look at expanding it within the city. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of Sheriff Clayton is great, but it's really the Ann Arbor Police Department that would probably have responded to the survey and giving you a little bit more on how they use 911 and also how they work with other social service agencies. Because there are other crisis lines that already exist in the city and the county. Like if your housing is secure, then you call the Hawk line. You can call United Way's 411 line. So there's all sorts of, or now we've got our supportive connections with the city, right? There's all sorts of ways where the city and the county are trying, I should say, not the county as this county government, but more like folks in the county, social services agencies working in the county are trying to find alternatives to 911. And that kind of speaks to the intention of the resolution, which was early on one of the the data points I really wanted to include, but was kind of like discouraged, was that death by police is the 6th leading cause of death for young Black men.
Wow.
And that's why the American Public Health Association made a statement that police violence is a public health issue that can directly cause injury and death. So different entities look at that as differently as a priority. So, Ann Arbor's approach to public health, social work to justice might differ, and that's why we're trying to do that work differently. But thank you for covering this. I just want to make that distinction. Like we are within the county, but I think earlier I said Ann Arbor thinks itself as being special in like very many ways, good and bad. But we have different constraints, different resources, I think different intentions in the county. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, no problem. It's hard to map out. They have, the county also has county commissioners. Ann Arbor's got city council, county has county commissioners, and then the sheriff sits alone.
So sorry. So would we be the first to have a program that was not run through 911?
I think so. I'm kind of thinking El Paso might also have its own number two. I'm not remembering right. They have a smaller unit, and they actually work really closely with the local medical system, with the local hospitals, and we're able to get the local hospitals to invest in the program, as well as I think the local community foundation. So. I'm pretty sure that because they had adequate funding, I think they were able to do something separate. So you might look in El Paso, of all places. Of all places, Texas actually has something good going on.
Yeah.
I had some questions too. I guess just like in your research and I guess first, thank you for the presentation. Super cool to see, fellow social work students here. But I had a question about just like in your research and everything, did you come across any discussions, papers, or anything about how these programs that you mentioned got community buy-in? Because I'm assuming like we're gonna have to have that here as well, of like getting people to kind of change their mindsets in terms of like where funding goes and all that. So I was just curious about if you came across any strategies that were used in other locations that could be translated here.
So they didn't really go through like the strategies on how they started. A lot of it was they did surveys and realized that there's a lack of just training, and they put out like awareness of that lack, and then just by having the dispatchers be able to respond to different individuals differently depending on the situation, the program just kind of kept working and increasing, and then it got public attention. So it got there's a lot of news media on Cahoots and on Stars, and the news just kind of made it boom a little bit, it seemed more like.
Okay, thank you.
So I think my first question is, are we saying that here, if a family calls the unarmed response team, they're guaranteed not to get an armed responder? That'd be my first question.
So there would be no guarantee because we still have to have the safety. They won't initially respond. If the crisis intervention specialist feels that they need to have an unarmed response, they will contact the police. But the idea is to not have the response, the police response, because it just doesn't promote a mental health situation like crisis intervention.
Normally folks are in some social setting. Be it a home or their home or they're in the neighborhood, but they're surrounded by people who have their own ideas about what should happen, what the proper resolution should be. What will guide this team's sense of what the appropriate resolution of a particular crisis should be?
So the idea would be they'd have crisis intervention training, such as being a social worker. They'd have the social work experience that would help them gain knowledge of how to de-escalate the situation, how to talk through it, and lower the possibility of violence. And through that, hopefully being able to talk through with the individual and correct it without any type of police response.
Okay, so I'm asking because when I read through the list of non-criminal crises, they don't describe conduct. They describe underlying social work situations like homelessness, intoxication, disorientation, substance abuse, mental illness problems, dispute resolution, but it doesn't say my cousin is breaking all my windows or has threatened to, hit me, or any of the behaviors that prompt people to contact help. So that's what I guess I would say. Like, how will we know? How will you know? How will the 911 dispatcher know? What actions should prompt what kind of responders? And then my second question is, how are we going to protect all of the vulnerable folks that get shot unjustly from being shot when the police are called because the crisis responder has overreacted or has responded to race or whatever else might trigger that fear, right?
Yeah, so initially the programs, they first responded specifically to nonviolent, so that would be the initial program response. The dispatcher would identify a nonviolent situation, and then they'd be responding to it. And then with more experience and as we work through the program, you would hopefully start extending to low violent situations. As for the gunshots, ideally the social worker will understand the situation and help discuss with the police officer before they are come to the scene, so that they can talk through what's already been discussed and happened. And hopefully with that knowledge, the police will less likely intervene with lethal force. And the social worker is still there to de-escalate along with it.
Could we look at, or have you considered, or do any of these other programs promote or incorporate non-lethal responses like stun guns and all of those sort of ways of controlling an individual without killing them?
Yeah, we haven't specifically looked into that, but that is a fantastic question. But I was just going to say, it's a lot of emphasis on not creating that negative environment where the person sees the police and it kind of escalates that situation. I mean, as we talked about for Cahoots, there have been so few calls that the crisis intervention specialist felt the need to call the police. And so we're hoping it'll be similar in that situation. We would like to hire a social worker or a crisis intervention specialist that has specific training and experiences in crisis situations so that they know how to respond adequately and to not introduce that armed response and force.
Sure, but I mean, crises will inflict the responder too. They'll end up in the middle of a crisis themselves. And I think it's both unfair and unwise, perhaps, to think that they are not going to be the victims of the same kind of institutionalized racism that everybody in the United States is. So that's my one thing. My second thing is, can we put more meat into, like, it's really not nonviolence. There is a kind of violence that is not life-threatening, right? Yeah. Which involves breaking and threatening and yelling and a whole range of activities. Can we look at responding to those categories of violence in addition to nonviolence?
Yeah, absolutely. That is something we've considered. I mean, based off the article where the man was slashing his brother's tires, I think that's similar to the violence you're talking about. And that was what triggered us to think, how can we find this response that doesn't lead to this violence, even in the face of perceived violence that is not necessarily active violence toward another person. If that clarifies.
Can I ask a clarifying, or I want to state something?
Right.
Because, I wrote this project last year, and I want to make something, I think we're not all understanding. Your intervention is a hypothetical intervention.
Yes.
And you guys know that unarmed crisis response is going on here, correct? And we are doing a study on it, or we have, this whole bidding process happening. You all know about that, right?
I'm going to say no.
Okay, so I think at times, we're asking you questions about what is actually happening in Ann Arbor. We should probably be asking Lynn or someone else. And then I think there's some confusion, but we're essentially giving you feedback on your hypothetical proposed intervention.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that we should just, because this is really happening, and there may have been some confusion
Right.
among us.
We're thinking that you've chosen what you think would be the best options for a city like ours to take.
Yes.
Well, and it's an excellent white paper because it got me thinking along lines
Yes.
that I had not previously.
But clearly, Ann Arbor might come up with different answers for different reasons. But we're interested in the reasons that you chose and why you chose them. Sure.
I would really recommend, so Senator Stephanie Chang out of Detroit has been a really good advocate on trying to secure more resources. I mean, she's a graduate of the MSW program here, also Ford School. And she was able to advance and pass Senate Bill 637 and 638 last year. And that has given additional funding for local emergency response for people dealing with specifically mental health crises. And that's for creating a jail diversion fund, a community crisis response grant program. So the thing about social work is that we rarely think about how things are funded. There's just never enough funding for this work. And we want to do and solve everything. So beyond looking at the local municipal efforts here and across the country, this is a really good time, especially in the state of Michigan, where there's a different legislative control for the first time in 40 years, where we can align and address things that went really wrong, specifically under the Engler administration. And people are trying to fix things and make sure that it's funded so that we can actually fix things over more than one term. So SB 637, 638, and that's just mental health, whereas like locally here, we're looking at substance abuse, homelessness, whatever the issues may be, domestic violence, whatever brings you to an unarmed crisis call. It means that you actually get a provider and not an armed policeman. So it's specifically not having an armed police. And the social worker or whoever is on that case has the option of calling police, but police themselves have said they have crime to solve.
Yeah.
And being poor, being mentally ill, being unhoused, that's not a crime. So thank you for looking at this, and I encourage you to reach out to Senator Chang. She's amazing.
Thank you.
I'm wondering about the training of the people who are intervening, the social workers, because this is clearly not something any social worker could do without some kind of emergency intervention training. Is that true, social worker people?
I mean,
We're pretty awesome.
I know you are.
Yeah, we're pretty awesome. I think anyone who goes through this has to have some anti-racist training. I think that's the biggest thing. That, like, we know from these statistics that racism literally kills people. And if there's a gun involved, and, it triggers people's fears and their stigmas about others. So it doesn't matter if it's a social worker or if it's someone else, there has to be some serious anti-racist training involved.
And, I'd certainly agree with that as well. And in my perspective in this moment, I believe that could be a key difference of, especially like police armed response, like their training, like maybe they'll do like, very minimal type of training that we're really wanting to focus on, where if it is a crisis interventionist, if it is a social worker, their base education and training And then subsequent trainings is really geared towards this one avenue and not all the other avenues that could come with being a police officer. So I just wanted to reinforce that as well.
Thank you. Other questions? We've given us a very good introduction to this unarmed response, and I thank you very much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for your time as well. Thank you for the feedback, and I'm glad that this could be a situation where we're all working together to help each other grow a little bit.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye. Good night. There.
Let's go to grad school again.
Yes.
Never.
As you might remember, we're forming a library of these reports. And they're useful, especially for introducing ourselves to a new thing, and for the new people who are coming aboard who maybe don't know some of the problems that we are introducing. So we'll put that on a drive that everybody can access. I know they've done something on reproductive freedom in Ann Arbor, what that means here. They have also done something on, they did 4 of them, and I don't know. Yes, I'm sorry. There were 4 programs. Reproductive rights, and they did something on Washtenaw ID card for immigrants. Specifically, and that is also, I think, would be an interesting one for us to look at. And that'll be available, and I'll send you copies of them also. Anything else? We've finished our agenda.
I see there's an item for commissioner comment, but we had that
Yes.
already, so I move that we adjourn.
Second?
No, I actually, so the questions that a lot of the questions that I asked really were prompted by the report, and I think that there are some suggestions. What do we do with them? These thoughts and suggestions about our approach to unarmed response?
Well, we are going to meet with the consultants about our program and what they're thinking, and we can ask some of those important questions to them and give them some ideas of how we're feeling about it and what we think is important.
So no opportunity to put those in writing before we meet?
Well, yes, there's an opportunity. We have to figure out when we're going to meet. And then
No, I know,
yeah,
but if it's just...
absolutely.
Yeah, because...
Yes, I think it'd be nice to prepare for it. I think it's an important meeting. So I'll let you know as soon as I know, and I'll get a little bit further out so that we'll have time for it.
Good.
Sound reasonable? And so that we'll have time for Christmas, which I think is also a high priority right now.
I repeat my motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then I'm going to ask for opposed. Thank you so much. See you next year.
From the unarmed response.